Variants are an interesting part of Skylanders history. They provide an alternative paint job to a pre-existing Skylander, experimenting with multiple fancy color palettes to essentially create a more premium version of the original Skylander. While some variants can look great next to the original counterpart, other variants I just find to be more superior to original Skylander design to a point where I'd consider it to be the definitive version of that character. These are 10 Skylanders Special Variants I prefer over the original design. As usual, do keep in mind that this video is in my rather silly personal opinion. What I consider to be a good variant will most likely suddenly differ between each and every one of us, and that's totally okay. I just want to share my thoughts on why certain variants I feel are much better than the original look of the Skylander. To clarify, I also don't have all the variants on this list since it's mainly going to be judged on a design basis, gameplay is not a factor, mostly, and there are some absolutely weird choices on this list. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin. Thunderbolt is a pretty fun trap master with a pretty lazy design. While this Traptinium sword is dope, Thunderbolt being a sentient cloud is honestly super boring, especially for how creative Skylanders designs could get. Fortunately, he was one of 3 trap masters to receive a crystal clear chase variant, and is a welcome change. It reminds me of the windbag Jin enemies from Spyro's Adventure, who I honestly think pulled the sentient cloud shtick better than Thunderbolt. But alas, Clear Thunderbolt is a chase variant and therefore the variant doesn't appear in-game. Hence Clear Thunderbolt's low placement. I've mentioned this before and I'll mention this again, I am personally not a fan of Chain Reaction's design. I find it bland and soulless and the generic black ghee does not help matters either. However, cover him up with a Scotch Soda Iron Brew and you get Clear Orange Chain Reaction. Is it objectively an improvement? Not really, but orange is one of my favourite colours, and for that simple reason alone is why this variant is even on this list. But once more, it is just a chase variant and therefore, logically I can't place this entry any higher. From one controversial Skylanders opinion to another, I'm personally a fan of the steel-plated variants. I only have steel-plated Hoot, but my choice goes to steel-plated Smash Hit. I already quite like Smash Hit's colour scheme as is, but green is another one of my favourite colours, especially when it's put in a metallic shade. The bright green mixed with silver reminds me of a Transformers Beast Wars figure transmitted to Cybershark. However, this variant is only a slight preference over the original look for me, and I'm more looking for variants that completely add a new dimension to a Skylanders design. Therefore, we carry on. Bad Juju has an amazing Aztec-inspired design. The mix of blue and gold with some purple adding a really nice secondary shade really makes her regal and majestic. So how do you top that? Throw in a nice consistent contrasting black and white colour scheme with some red highlights to really bring this alternate variant to life. Mystical Bad Juju is an awesome and unique variant that is practically on par with the original. That's the problem. Mystical Bad Juju is a marginal preference over the original for me, as it's essentially a core palette swap of an already cool design, and she did have some points docked for not retaining the awesome transparent magenta blades in-game. You had one job, Activision. Hoot Loop may be a fun swapper to mess around with, but by no means is it one of my favourites, and its design is one of these contributors. It's not terrible, just a bit basic, and his safe colour scheme doesn't help him in this regard either. His Enchanted variant makes things more intriguing, however. He shares a similar black and white colour scheme to Mystical Bad Juju, albeit without the tertiary red colour, but he more than makes up for it with how it's portrayed in-game, with how some of his white armour shifts to a cyan colour. It heavily reminds me of the Kinder Egg creatures that change colour when you put them in water, and on top of that, it's a pleasing effect to look at, and it makes this variant more than the sum of its parts. I don't blame you if you find Headrush to have a bland design. I personally like the Nordic Viking look she has going on, although her Ring of Heroes Awakening design honestly does that concept a lot more justice. So let's switch up the colour scheme a little and there we go. The Nitro series of variants are pretty fantastic. Crypt King notwithstanding despite my personal love for that figure, but Head Rusher's variant in particular stands out for being a nice overhaul in her design, with her gold standing out a lot more than the standard brown of the earth element, with the white checkered patterns on her arm gauntlets, further adding a more unique element to her design. She also looks a lot more like a frost elf now, which makes Head Rush that extra bit more distinctive in comparison to the likes of Stealth Elf and Flameslinger. Fire Kraken's design is fascinating in the sense that it draws a lot from Chinese influences, but I'm not a fan of how loud his colour scheme is. While it's definitely not the worst example I've seen in fictional media, I just never really found it to be easy on the eyes. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum, Jade Fire Kraken is one of my personal favourite variants of all time. The shade of green cast in a transparent plastic combined with a secondary gold colour, and what you get is one very pristine and beautiful figure. If there's a variant on this list for my own personal collection I'd recommend, it's definitely this one. Wildfire is a trap master who I feel is definitely worthy of his popularity, except when design is taken into account. Even as a young lad, I found Wildfire's base design to be pretty boring. A solid gold anthropomorphic lion with no colour breakup whatsoever. I never owned Wildfire for a long time, until a fateful trip to CEX where I bought Dark Wildfire, who is now decked out with a black and silver gradient colour scheme. I personally find this look to be a lot more imposing, and his iconic Traptanium shield feels more highlighted, and it complements this dark variant super well. Is it a basic change? Yes. But is it one that overall improves my enjoyment of playing and displaying Wildfire? Absolutely. Crusher may be quite recognizable due to being the Earth representative of a giant and whatnot, but his color palette makes him look like Prison Break, but on steroids. There are certainly some notable aspects to his design, like his helmet with a crystal spike stretching out his shoulder, but in contrast to the other giants, I honestly feel Crusher doesn't have anything to write home about. Enter Granite Crusher, and I absolutely love this recolor. The more focused blue and black color scheme blends together super well, and the extra blue really emphasizes the crystals that protrude all around his body, as well as providing an ever-present contrast that makes his design more imposing and fun to look at. Most important of all, this reminds me of Jimmy Stringer from Hero Factory in his breakout form. Anything that reminds me of Stringer is automatically cool. Crusher might be my least favorite giant, but I enjoy myself 12% more when playing his superior Granite variant. Slobbertooth's design is one of the weakest in the franchise for me. He shares a common issue with other swap for Skylanders with how they execute one or two design concepts in the most standard way possible, but Slobbertooth takes the cake for just being completely unappealing to me. He's a dinosaur turtle and that is it. His color scheme does a continuously great job at making his design more repulsive than it needs to be. Remember when I said I love the color green? Not here. I've always only had the dark Slobbertooth variant, and holy hell, is it a major improvement. Slobbertooth's design, for starters, doesn't make me want to cringe in disgust anymore. The silver color of his shell and teeth provide a sharp contrast and draws attention to the figure. Slobbertooth now also looks pretty darn awesome and somewhat menacing. This variant for me improves on its design in every conceivable fashion. In my personal opinion, Dark Slobbertooth is the best example of a variant that has a superior design over the original Skylander. Sadly, this video is about to come to a close, but which Skylander variants do you prefer over the original design? I'm open to any opinions. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.